Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Vertical Living as we talk about navigating interaction online or social media interaction as a Jesus follower. And it can be complex. It's something we have to learn. So I'm glad to have Ron Kirkley with me, neighbor and friend and Vertical active member. So when we get online and we post, and then I'm sure you've discovered that guy online. Sometimes it's that girl, that woman, that person who is the grammar police. They like to come along. You're not that guy, are you?
No. Actually, I'm just relieved to find out that we're still friends after the first episode. That's good.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
good. But I'm not that person.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the funny thing about that guy is often that guy doesn't know they're that guy. So
Yes.
I'm not saying anything about you, but
I go home and look through everything.
but there are those who are that person.
Yeah.
Where they feel like it's their duty to correct the improper use of the word there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
That's a good one.
You know. But then it spills over because then there's another type of social media police out there. It's the one who wants to correct philosophical statements, moral statements, religious statements, political statements that they somehow feel it's their duty to be the corrector, the one, I'm going to give you a ticket, I'm going to point out where you're wrong and pull you over. In effect, they're the police.
I think I've been ticketed before. Yes.
And some people are gracious enough to send it as a private message.
Yes.
Some, not so much.
That's
they
good.
figure if you send in public, you need to be corrected in public.
I guess so.
And they make full use of that.
Yeah.
So I've done some of that in the past, not found it to be successful.
Yeah.
So learned some lessons along the way there. And, interestingly, those same lessons fit with life and interactions with people.
Yeah.
And so I've discovered that there is a way to handle correction because sometimes there's a genuine need to help someone
Absolutely.
along the way.
It's essential, right?
It is. That's part of what we do.
For my life, for your life, it's essential.
As Jesus followers, there's a time when you want to have a conversation with someone to help them grow up in the faith, learn something, come to understand something. That happened with the Apostle Paul when he was a new believer. He's teaching on one occasion, and he's not teaching full truth. And so some good friends come along, and they correct him. They help him see the way in which to understand who Christ is, and he learns and moves on. It's a good thing. So in the business realm that you work in, and I'm sure you have found this principle to be true at home in a relationship as well, there's a way to handle that. What is that way that you have found for helping employees, family members?
It's the
family.
Yeah, it's the same in both situations, and I think when it comes to correction, the most important thing for me initially is where's my heart, right? So I have to make sure, and that's that part where you go back to Jesus and just make sure that my heart, this isn't self-serving.
Right.
That's the easiest way. And oftentimes, if I post something online, 15 minutes later, I realize that was very self-serving.
Yeah.
That was about you. That was about your need.
Yeah.
When it comes to correction, I think it's important that it not be self-serving, it not be about your need. As far as best practices, I'm a believer that it should always be in private. It should never be in public. I don't have any original ideas, but I've been the benefit of a lot of wise people that have come beside me and shared things with me. And early on in parenting, Emily and I received some really good advice regarding this with parenting. Do not correct your kids in public. And you see it all the time.
Yeah.
And the reason was, and I find this is true in the business world as well, I also don't correct employees on a conference call or anywhere, ever.
So if they say something in the midst of a conversation or meeting, you don't use that opportunity there in front of everyone else to point out their flaws or tell them where they're wrong.
No, and obviously there's an expectation this is going to be online, so I know I'll be accountable, but I don't. No, at the very most I will do is let's talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Now, there's probably a sense among people that have worked for me for a long time that they know
Yeah.
that there's a conversation
There's
coming.
going to be a conversation. Yeah.
But the problem with correcting in public, whether it's online or it's your kids or it's the people that you're responsible for at work, you run the risk that whatever message you have for them, regardless of if it is not self-serving, even if your heart's in the right place,
Yeah.
and even if it's a very important message, you really run the risk that that's going to be lost in shame,
Yeah.
embarrassment,
Yeah.
and these really strong visceral emotions that are going to override any opportunity, that are going to create bitterness,
Yeah.
and ultimately are not going to accomplish the things that you want, and they're going to damage the relationship.
Right. You're going
Right.
to lose their heart
Yes,
in the matter.
yes.
They may be completely wrong.
That's right.
You may be completely right, but because you chose that format, the embarrassment or the shame caused them to pull their heart away.
Yes, goes back to what we talked about last episode, in the sense that, like, in order for people to hear you, it's important that they know you care.
Yeah.
And when you shame and embarrass people in public,
Yeah.
if you run the risk of doing that, you're taken away from that account. You're not depositing in it, and
Yeah.
it reduces the opportunity for you to speak to their heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what is best practice? We walk over now, we're on Twitter or Facebook, and here it comes. Here comes that post from that person you know who you thought would not have ever posted that, and they did.
Right.
What do you do? Because the urge is, the temptation is, the allure is, I'm going to say something right there and post your comment.
Yeah.
Click, send, and there it is. It's all out in front of everybody to see.
Yes, everyone.
Yeah.
And even more, and I think mentally and emotionally sometimes for folks, it's even out there for more people than it actually is, because there's this sense that, like, you just shamed me in front of the whole world. Even though that may not be true, there's that sense of this on social media for sure.
Yeah.
So I would suggest avoiding that.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly for me with my social media interactions, it starts with that reality. I'm not going to correct. I may stick a sign in my yard and let you know who I am, but I'm not going to correct. And if I do feel like I need to have a conversation, it's going to be in private.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. And there's a place for praise as well. The phrase that I've heard is praise in public, correct in private.
Yes, that's good.
So use that moment to really build people up.
Yes.
Use those moments in public settings to praise someone. That's edifying, that's encouraging, that wins a heart, and that increases motivation.
Yes. Yes. And people need that.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
sure.
Like, you rarely hear people saying, I don't get enough criticism, correction, and embarrassment and shame. But you oftentimes get this sense talking to people, like, they feel like they either lack purpose or they lack, and a lot of that comes from the fact, like, they're not being praised.
Yep.
That they're not being identified with all the great things that they're a part of. So there's an incredible opportunity on social media.
And that's true. That principle applies in parenting. You want your kids to hear much more praise from you than correction from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes for a more healthy home environment. It makes for a healthy work environment.
Oh, yeah.
If there's a supervisor who is an encourager, then what you get are employees who want to serve, who want to do their best.
Yes.
It works well in a faith church environment. People need encouragement and praise, not the overbalance of corrective and discipline and condemnation. Those environments don't help people grow in the faith. And so the same, I would think, would be true for our online experience.
And you said something there that got my attention. Going back to the idea of self-serving. If you're correcting, especially if you're correcting online, is there an opportunity for a person to grow?
Yeah.
And my answer would be like 95% of the time, no. Like, that's not going to happen in that environment. If I'm intellectually honest in the moment, I'm like, I can't convince myself this is about changing or convincing them or helping them to grow. Then I have to really worry or wonder about my own motivations again.
Yeah, exactly.
My heart.
Yeah. There was another thing that in education for Christians, for a while there was this training that happened in some school settings where they were training Christians to know how to debate a teacher regarding creation evolution.
Okay.
So, a Christian student heads off to college. I've got my verses and I've got my thoughts, and I'm going to show my professor, the truth. And while that may seem well intended, I just imagine those settings. You get into a college classroom setting. Maybe there's 20, maybe there's 200 in a classroom.
Yep.
Professor's teaching the same curriculum he's been teaching for decades, most likely. He's set his philosophical approach, his teaching format, and well-intended Christian raises his hand and wants to confront teacher in front of 200 students with the idea that I'm going to show him, and I bet at the end of it he's going to say, "Oh, you're so right. That doesn't ever happen."
Yeah.
Partly because of the setting.
Right. That's
There's
right.
no relational setting.
There's a lot of opportunity for shame and embarrassment.
Exactly.
I mean, the professor doesn't want to be shamed and embarrassed. I don't want to be shamed and embarrassed. You don't. That's a good example.
Yeah, and if you discredit him, or if he allows you to discredit him in front of his class, he's lost his whole class at that point. So even if he were to believe and think you're right, my guess is in front of a group of people, he would never admit it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And so that can happen online as well.
I would think so.
We might get online and make our point and point our scriptures out and tell them where they're wrong and we be right. But because it's happening in a public format, my experience is that person is not even going to admit that you're right because they can't in front of everyone else.
Yes, I would agree. And there's not a lot of, I don't think, scriptural or in my experience personally, reason to believe that the design for winning hearts looks like that.
No.
Right? It's almost always it's relational. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we run the risk that we could get online with good intentions, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're like, I'm winning people for the gospel.
Yeah.
I'm sharing good truth.
Yeah.
I'm honoring God.
Yeah.
In my experience, for me, not speaking for anyone else, generally when I step out of it and I look inward and I'm like, so what was that really about? Did you believe that this was changing people? Did you believe this was? Oftentimes it ends up being self-serving, and I realize that wasn't a good idea.
Yeah. And I would think this would be true that all of the New Testament one another's, love one another, serve one another, forgive one another, those are all interpersonal things that happen.
That's good. Yeah.
Not just conceptual things that happen. They require flesh and blood to flesh and blood.
That's good. Yep. That's right.
We see Jesus do that with us. He's not just God's theory that showed up or is. Yes. He became flesh and tabernacled, lived among us. He came and interacted with us. And he came in a spirit of love. And he came to give forgiveness. And it happened on a very personal basis.
Yes. Yep.
One other verse to, I think, kind of wraps things up for us today. Colossians 4:6. It says, "Let your speech be always with grace, having been seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." So there's this idea that when we speak, every word that we say ought to have some grace to it, which is like mercy.
Yes.
Not giving someone what they deserve, but actually giving them something gracious, something that they couldn't have earned. You're being very kind to them. You're overly gracious, and you're actually creating desire in them to want to build a relationship. That's what grace is.
Yeah, that's good.
So seasoning every post with grace really ought to be what we do.
Yeah, certainly responses, I would think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're engaging in any conversation, anything that mimics the relational, boy, I think at that moment we go from, like you talked about in the last episode, I'm putting my sign in my front yard just to let people know something I'm interested in, something important to me. Mm-hmm. You're moving out of that arena, and maybe without even recognizing it, you're moving into an arena that is faux relational. Yeah. And as a result, that's important.
Yeah, sure. And the thing that I think, especially on Facebook, that has happened is that they promote groups. So if you find you like gardening, go get in a gardening group.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Don't beat up everybody else because they don't garden, right?
That's true. I hadn't thought of that, but
I mean, quit taking digs at them.
yeah. Oh,
Just had to get that in there. I mean,
I'm groaning too.
yeah. Well, plant some seeds of kindness. No,
Now I'm really groaning.
But really, if you have a specific area of interest and you really want to talk about that, go get in a group of people who like talking about those things.
Absolutely.
Don't preach to everybody else for not being in your group. So I think those things help us praise in public, correct in private.
Yes.
Let everything you do be seasoned with a seasoning of grace to create desire to want to build a relationship. And then we get much further down the road knowing how to interact.
Good
online.
stuff.
That's
Yep.
good. All right. Thanks, Ron, for joining us.
Absolutely.
And we
It's
will
fun.
hopefully see y'all in episode 3.